Good day. It's time for my devotional. Welcome. Um, Hope you're having a good day wherever you are, whatever you're up to. We've been working our way through the book of Proverbs, and today we're in chapter 6, verse 28. And so I'm going to take a look at that. As usual, I just like to give you a little bit of what's happening around the verse. And this section of Proverbs is talking about learning God's ways. And so it uses this idea of my son, obey my teaching, listen to them, and, it's your mother's teaching, don't forget them. Uses this kind of an idea, kind of an image of a young man being taught by his parents. And the whole point, God is saying, here's what wisdom is, here's the way, and it's something that should be passed from generation to generation. And he uses all this imagery. Now, verse 28 is in that, and he's warning his son about adultery in particular, about having an affair with his neighbor's wife. And he's saying, don't do this, stay away from this. And so he's giving all this description about that, about why you should stay away from that scenario. But in the middle of it, he uses this image we're going to read today. But it's something that we can apply if we just think about in general, about dealing with temptation in general, any one of us, for not just that particular scenario, but any scenario when we're dealing with temptation. And so he uses this image. So I'm going to read it to you now. Verse 28 says, "Can a man walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched?" So the verse before that was saying, can a man take fire into his bosom? Kind of like a modern version, you might say, can a man take fire into his pocket, right? Can you put fire in your pocket, your shirt pocket? Or even, imagine you're wearing a hoodie and you put it in the pocket there in front. If you put fire in there, you're going to get burnt. And this idea here, can a man walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? And of course, it's rhetorical. The obvious answer is no, you're going to get burnt. Our modern version of this in our culture, and here in modern Western world, we might say, if you play with fire, you're going to get burnt. Same idea, right? If you're going to play with fire, then don't be surprised when it burns you. And that's the whole idea. So now you might hear this one. And if you're a bit of a skeptic, you might say, oh, but people do walk on fire. We know about the fire walkers, right? It's a whole thing. It's a whole kind of almost a hobby for some people to walk across beds of coals and all this stuff. And so there's a thing, right? That the Bible said this, but the people do that. And so, is the Bible wrong? It says, it implies you can't, but you can. And I would say, no, the Bible's not wrong, because that's not the point. People, yes, there's this thing where people, they light a fire, they let the coals burn to a certain degree, and then they let them sort of simmer for a certain degree so that the surface temperature is just right. And then they walk very quickly and carefully over the coals, not too quick and not too slow. It's just an exact speed you need to go. And so, yes, there is a thing like that. But that's not the point. The Bible isn't trying to say there's absolutely no way that you can make this image break down. Of course there are. You can say, well, I could wear shoes. I could wear fireproof shoes across the coals and I won't get burnt. Well, okay, fair enough. But that's not the point. And when people do that with scripture verses like that, they're just almost deliberately missing the point. The point here is you just can't do this. Like, as all things being equal, if you went for a walk in your bare feet and you walked across a fire, you would know it because it'll burn your feet. You're going to get burnt. You're not going to get away with that. You could be completely blind and walk on it. You'll know you're on fire because you'll feel it. And that's the point. It's not, can you figure it away? But it's interesting that our minds kind of go there. We kind of go to thinking, well, is there a way? And that's actually what people do with temptation. We try to come up with a way that I can walk on fire and not get hurt. And we do that with whatever the temptation is in our life. If there's something that I know it's wrong, but I want it anyway. And so then you start to do all this rationalizing. You start to come up with things that, well, maybe this, I can do it. It won't hurt me. I'm a pretty tough guy. The fire won't hurt me. I can put my mind over matter. That's all it takes. Mind over matter. I can walk on the coals. Or if I'm really careful, or if I buy the right shoes, if I walk really quickly, if I, then it won't. And we come up with all these ways to try and walk on the fire. And that's what we do. And that's a really bad process. And that's why temptation is often so successful with people, is because they go down that road of entertaining a way to do the thing, right? So what temptation we're talking about here, temptation to do something wrong. What temptation is it's a desire that stirs up inside of you to want the thing. And then that creates in you a drive, right? And so then what you do is you start to try and find a way to remove the obstacles to the thing, to the drive. And you try and figure out how can I achieve the thing I want? And that's where rationalization comes in. Instead of Instead of realizing this is wrong, I shouldn't want this in the first place, we decide that the want needs to be satisfied. And so, like the bed of coals that you're going to walk over, it's like, "Oh, I can do it. There's a way. I know I can do it. I'll figure this out." And you come up with all these reasons. But actions have consequences. They simply do. There's cause and effect in our world. If you do something, it's going to have an outcome. And what Proverbs is warning us of is that really, in the end, even if you rush across the coals once and you try to go back across them again, eventually what you're going to find is you are going to get burnt. The temptation to do wrong always ends in somebody getting burnt. There's always consequences. So how do we do that? How do we fight that? Do we learn how to walk on fire? No. What we do is we just don't try. Don't try to walk on fire. We need to come back and say no to the temptation. And one of the ways you can do that to help you in your life do that is by learning to label your rationalization. And it can be really useful. What you do is in your head, you'll start to hear yourself coming up with reasons, right? Oh, it's like, oh, well, maybe it's not really that bad. And then you need to stop yourself and go, oh, wait now. It is that bad. All I'm doing is trying to repaint this. I'm trying to fool myself here. So you label it. I'm just rationalizing, right? And oh well, maybe if nobody would blame me. You stop yourself and you're like, wait now, all you're doing is rationalizing here, Tim. People will blame you. Don't convince yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. This is not good. Or well, it's normal. Everybody does this kind of thing. It's just very common, really. What's the big deal anyway? Stop yourself and label it. No, man, you're just rationalizing. It's all you're doing. You're rationalizing. It is bad. It's not a good thing. Don't do it. And you can do that, and it can help you to combat the temptation, because the temptation is creating in you this desire to think you can do it, that there is reasons why you can't do it. You'll start to argue the merit when you're really tempted by something. You'll start to argue why it's actually really a good thing. It's really not. It's actually good. It's a good thing that I do this whatever it is, because after all, it'll make me happier, or it'll do this, or it'll do that. And we come up with all these reasons, and we start to. I'm not so sure it is a bad thing after all. Really, why did anybody ever think it was? I think they're just misguided, right? And you start to do that. So stop, label it. No, I'm just rationalizing. That process of fighting off temptation by labeling it can be useful, but what it requires is that in advance you've already made a decision. A lot of the times people fall to temptation because they make the decision as the temptation's happening. They decide to fall, and what you need to do is make the decision before that. So when there's something in life that is wrong, you settle that in your mind and you decide this is wrong, and you do it apart from the tempt. Before you're ever tempted, you decide this is a code of life I'm going to live by. I will, in this case, this example, I will not have an affair with somebody else's wife. I'm not going to do that. That is wrong. The scriptures make it clear it's wrong. God has taught us it's wrong. It's wrong. And you make that decision in your mind so that when the temptation comes, you can resort back to the decision. I made a decision when I wasn't feeling tempted. And so that's the decision I'm going to stick with, rather than what I'm doing right now, where my mind is going this way and that way, and I'm trying to rationalize. No, I'm going to call that what it is. It's rationalization. When I was of my right mind, I made the right decision, and I'm sticking with it. And that's the kind of determination you have to have. And if you do that, then when you face temptation, you have a much better chance of succeeding against it. And then you just don't let yourself rationalize. You stop yourself. I'm not going to entertain those thoughts. I'm not going to let myself have those thoughts. If I want to have those thoughts, when the temptations are all gone, I'll go back to having a sensible discussion with myself about that. But not here in the middle of the temptation. That's the worst time to try and make up your mind about what's right and wrong. You need to do that beforehand so that you know. So doing something like reading the Bible can help you form a good moral code before you're ever tempted by anything, so that you know where you stand, you know where right and wrong is, so that when the temptation hits, you can stand against it. And then you don't argue with yourself. And you made your decision beforehand. You stick with it, and you don't let yourself argue with yourself and basically lie to yourself. That's the idea. Can a person walk on fire and not get hurt? Well, not really. So don't walk on fire. And then when the temptation comes to walk across the fire, don't do it. I don't know why anybody would be tempted to walk across fire. But anyway, that's the point. God bless you. Have a good day. And God help us resist the temptations of the world and to stand true. God willing, we'll see you tomorrow for verse 29. Have a great day.